all starts. The wood comes from New York and Pennsylvania, where we harvest it up there and take it to our mills and turn it into these billets that are 37 inches long, 3 inches in diameter. And then we come here and we're ready to start picking out the highest quality wood. It's a very scientific process, as you'll see as we go through the steps and stages of making a Louisville Slugger bat to get on a major league field.
Because a sixth generation Californian, I've always heard it called Louisville University, but the bat has always been Louisville Slugger. What is the correct pronunciation?
If you're in this community in Kentucky, it's Louisville, but outside of there, most people do call it Louisville. So we've always kind of marketed it as Louisville Slugger. That's what most people know it as. But when you're here, it's Louisville, and people will say Louisville Slugger, or most of the locals just say Slugger. It is primarily maple, birch, and ash. Now, for decades, ash was the wood of choice.
I know oak is a hard wood. Oak doesn't make a good baseball bat?
We made some oak bats way back in the day, way back in the early 1900s, but oak is just a little too heavy. Over the last 15 years or so, maple has become the wood of choice. It's just a harder, denser wood. Birch is another very hard wood that a lot of players like, and actually, the more they hit the ball in the sweet spot gets harder with birch. So it's really interesting to see how the species of wood have changed with Major League ball players.
So you mentioned these billets are 37 inches long.
Yes.
What if a player wants a 38-inch bat? Is that not allowed in the major leagues?
It is allowed in the major leagues. Actually, major league rules allow a bat up to 42 inches in length.
Holy
Now, we're not aware of any player who's ever used one that long in a game, but we did make a 42-inch bat for Frank Howard, who was a player back in the day, who was a huge guy, 6'7" We made that 42-inch bat for him actually for a photo shoot for an advertising campaign, but he never used it in a game. But Babe Ruth used to order some bats that were 36 inches long, but you know, today 34 is pretty much the standard.
And here at Louisville Slugger, you don't have a long bit that goes down the bat and you fill it with cork. None of that going on?
We get asked that question all the time. It's like, okay, so where did you guys cork Sammy Sosa's bats? Well, we didn't cork Sammy Sosa's bats. No more comment on that, but there is no corking department here at Louisville Slugger.
First of all, let me ask you about what this machine is we're standing by here. Right? What am I looking at here?
This is a CNC lathe, a computer numeric control lathe. It's a lathe that turns and spins and allows us to put knives up against that wood and shape the bat, but it's all controlled by the computer, which means that it makes these bats consistent every time. You know, back in the old days, we used to hand turn these bats. You know, we had craftsmen who literally stood there with calipers and gauges and would measure and just keep turning the bat and try to get it as close to the previous model as possible. Using these CNC lathes allows us to have a way to produce a consistent product, which, as we all know, Major League Baseball players are very particular about that piece of wood that's in their hands.
So with one of these lathes, how long does it take to go from this to that right there?
It takes about 45 seconds, which is amazing because back in the old days when we hand turned bats, it would take 30 to 40 minutes for a craftsperson to turn that bat into the shape, or turn that billet into the shape of a bat. Here now it's about 45 seconds.
Now I noticed on the front side of this machine there's a sticker with Trevor Hoffman on it. I'm a big baseball fan. I don't remember him hitting too much. I know he came up as a shortstop. Why is Trevor Hoffman on the front of a bat-making machine?
Well, anytime we get Major League players who come in here, and we get a lot of them, especially ones who we made bats for, we have them sign the machine because this is the machine that made their bats. And Hoffman was here a little over a year ago, and we asked him to sign the machine, and he's like, okay, well, I didn't hit a whole lot, but you did make a few bats for me, so I will.
Who are you trying to fool, Trevor? Hey, putting the sticker on the bat machine? I don't know, buddy.
Trevor Hoffman wrote that he didn't throw hard enough to break a bat, but he sure found a lot of ways to get guys out without breaking bats.
I think the changeup doesn't break a lot of bats, right? One more quick question for you now that we're on here. Do you guys supply the pine tar as well?
Well, I will show you a George Brett pine tar bat that we have in the museum if you want. It's not the pine tar bat, but it is a pine tar bat, and George Brett used a lot of pine tar. We don't supply it, but we definitely condone it.
So George wasn't blaming you guys then, huh?
No. This is what the bat's like when it comes out of that CNC lathe.
Yeah.
So you can see that it's still a little rough, and then we go through the sanding machine. John, just like the one you have in your hand there, very smooth as it goes through that sander. And you can imagine we go through a lot of sandpaper here.
This is as smooth and soft as a baby. I really am impressed with how smooth this is. It's amazing.
It is as smooth as glass.
Going back to the days of manual lathing, I'm assuming there was also manual sanding.
There was.
What's the time difference between those two?
Probably 10, 15 minutes, and now you can do it in 30 seconds. And then he puts the bats on the scale to check the weight and make sure that the weight is where it needs to be at this point in the process. The processes have come a long way, which allows us to make a lot more bats. On any given day, we're probably making 250 to 300 major league or professional bats in the factory.
Yep.
But overall, with bats that we're making for amateur players, and then also we have a huge souvenir bat business. It's not unusual for us to make 2,500 or 3,000 bats in a day here in this factory.
Wow, that is amazing.
Yeah, it really is.
Tell me what they're doing behind us right now.
So the next stages in our process are making the bat harder. You know, we're working with hardwoods, maple, birch, ash, but we have to make the bat even harder than just that wood is from, you know, growing in the forest. And so we have a number of processes that we put the wood through to help make the barrel of the bat super hard, so that when the player steps in the batter's box, they don't have to worry about how their bat's going to perform. They can concentrate on that pitcher. This process is what's called filler. We dip the bats into a wood filler, and it helps close the grain, and then they will hang on these racks for a few hours and cure, get really hard, and then we move on down to the next step of the process, which is barrel compression.
Baseball is such a nostalgic sport. You think about everything that it does for families and dads and moms that watch it with their kids. When you walk in here and you hear the sounds and you get the smells and everything, kind of what is the nostalgic purpose for you?
You know, it takes me right back to being 12 years old. You know, I grew up in Northern Ohio, long-suffering Cleveland Indians fan, Cleveland Guardians now, and remember going to the ballpark with my dad, you know, and then watching games on TV. And this is what it takes me back to those days, you know, being a kid and watching baseball and going to the ballpark and just hearing the crack of the bat. There's no better sound than that crack of the bat. We just left the filler station, and after the bats have cured, we come to barrel compression, and that's what Tim is doing here. You know, he sands the filler off that has cured on the barrel, making it hard, and that's what he's doing here. But there's also about 500 pounds of pressure that is going onto the barrel of the bat that's helping close that grain even more.
So he's not really sanding it any further.
This kind of does two things. It kind of sands the filler off and then compresses the barrel to make it super hard.
How enjoyable is it to see Jay Cronenworth or one of your clients popping a home run, rooping a double?
We get a thrill out of it, and everybody who works here gets a thrill out of it, especially the people who are here in this factory. Our people are baseball fans, so they watch a lot of baseball, and then when they see our product in the hands of these players on TV and they do something great, they get really excited about it, and they take tremendous pride in that, and it makes them want to continue to do a great job and send high quality products to these players.
I was going to say, it probably really motivates them to do a good job the next day at work.
Absolutely it does, you know, because they see the guy did something good with something that they helped make.
Rick, next process here, I see paint going on bats. What is it as simple as that?
Well, it's a little more complicated than that because our finishes are very special finishes. We work with you know, some proprietary finish vendors to get the finishes exactly right so that it can be as hard as it possibly can be on that bat. What we're seeing right now is a color going on, and so these bats will get their color and then they're going to go sit out for a couple of days and cure and get really hard, and then they're going to come back in for another coat. Then they'll get their decals with the Louisville Slugger logo, cure another couple of days, and they're going to come back and get their final coat before they go and get the player's name laser engraved on the end.
So
I don't know if you know this, but when was the first guy like, nah, I need my bat to be bright red or something? You know what I mean? Because for the longest time it was, you know, natural wood. When did the painting process start to come along, if you know that?
So, you know, as you said, natural color bats, that was the standard forever. Nobody really did anything other than, you know, a clear coat on a natural wood bat, or some players just used the raw wood with no clear coat. But it was back in the 1970s, really, that we first saw black go onto bats. You know, from there it has progressed. Major League Baseball does have a limit on the colors that can be used on a Major League field, so it's primarily the natural finish, the black, some variations on brown, some variations on gray. You know, that's pretty much it. You know, they're very particular about what colors are used on the field. And we do all those kind of crazy colors for amateur players who go on our website and customize bats, and they order the exact same quality wood that we, you know, sell to Major League players, and then they design them with all kinds of crazy colors, sometimes to match their team colors, sometimes just to match their personality, and it's a lot of fun for our folks to create those things.
All right, Rick's making his custom Louisville Slugger in the shop. What color is he putting on?
You know, I would go with some red and blue there, I believe.
Howard, what are you putting on your bat?
Scarlet and red, black, Aztecs colors.
Real original, huh? I'm going lime green, baby.
Okay, Rick, after the bat is painted, what's the next step?
For it to be a Louisville Slugger, it has to have the player's name on the barrel, right?
Okay.
And contract players get their signature on the barrel, and then players who are not contract get their name in block letters.
When did the name on the bat start?
You know, that started back in 1905.
Holy mackerel, these guys, they had a little ego and personality even back then.
You know, it all started in 1905 when we signed a guy named Hannes Wagner, who was one of the first players inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame, one of the first 5. And we signed him to a bat contract to not only use our bats, but help promote our bats in 1905. And that was the very first professional athlete endorsement contract of a sporting goods product. So we started all this stuff over 100 years ago in 1905. You know, the Michael Jordans and LeBron James and Steph Currys and all the guys in the NFL and the Major League Baseball and everywhere who are getting these endorsement contracts, especially when it's a sporting goods product, they can thank Louisville Slugger. We started this in 1905.
That's awesome. Tell us about Tony Gwynn. I know that he was a Louisville Slugger guy.
You know, Tony Gwynn was a tremendous human being first. Even before you even start talking about all the things that he did as a baseball player. Of course, we know he is also an Aztec basketball player, played 4 years. I think he was an all-conference player.
Very good player.
Just a wonderful human being and one of our most loyal customers ever. And his model was the G170, the G for Gwynn, and 170 means he was the 170th player in Louisville Slugger history whose last name began with the letter G, who had a bat model made for him. It's kind of a weird system that we have, an alphanumeric, you know, kind of a system for naming bat models. But you know, Tony Gwynn used that G170 to not only get to the Hall of Fame, but also win 8 National League batting titles.
You have to take some pride in the fact that he's won 8 batting titles.
We sure do. We sure do. You know, we develop these relationships with these players, and as you get to know them more and more over the years, and you know, see them not only as a ball player but as a person and what they do, you really become big fans of these guys, and especially somebody like Tony Gwynn. Really, the last stop after the player's name goes on the bat is that it will get the born-on date, the date that the bat was made, along with the model and the weight and the length, laser engraved on the knob. And that is the very last step before it goes in the box and out the door to a Major League ball player. The born-on date is important because Major League Baseball tracks every bat that you used in Major League Baseball.
So how much do you guys have to work with MLB? Some guy can't just be lathing bats in his garage and hand it to whoever, Jerks and Profar, and say, hey, try this out?
Exactly. So we work very, very closely with Major League Baseball on a daily basis, really, and all the clubhouse managers, also, you know, the folks in New York at MLB to make sure that, you know, we're making a consistent product and a high quality product, and that, you know, every bat manufacturer out there, you know, has to pay a fee to Major League Baseball every year to cover insurance and all those things to make sure that they are licensed to produce bats for professional players. But it's something that we've been doing for 140 years. Nobody's been doing it any longer than we have. No one's made more bats than we had. More great moments in baseball history have been made with the Louisville Slugger bat than all other bat brands combined.